Hello everyone, I'm Bruffy1322 and this is a video that's very different but something that I've always wanted to do, and it's talk about my experiences with anxiety that I went through about 10 years ago as of the uploading of this, basically as the summer of 2021. It's going to be a long one because there's a lot to unpack. I'm not going to be talking like this all the time. Most of it actually comes from the podcast. So on the podcast, maybe 2 months or so ago, maybe I think it was, we had a discussion about this, and I felt like the podcast was the right place to talk about it and open up about it. It's something that I've always wanted to do, but I've never felt comfortable with it, and I thought, look, let's just do it, and the podcast is the right place. There's less of an audience on the podcast rather than putting something up in straight as a video on the main channel. And the response to it was, very positive. There was a lot of love in the chat at the time of doing the podcast. People have contacted me after doing the podcast and said how it's helped. So I wanted to take my story from the podcast, because it was, it was a good 2.5 hours long, maybe the whole thing. And we talked through with everybody about their experiences as well. But I wanted to just take my section from that, my experience, my story with anxiety, cut it together and upload it here to the main channel, because if it helps and even a single person, it will be worth it. Even if it's a single person who would never have seen it otherwise, because it was on the podcast channel, it'll be worth it. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy it. It's there's a full story, even if you're not experiencing any of this sort of stuff. Hopefully it will give you some sort of understanding of what I went through and what you can go through and how it all works. And yeah, there'll be all sorts of resources linked down below in the description as well, including the full podcast if you want to just watch that straight off. But yeah, a lot of stuff in the description and the pinned comment. So yeah, I've rambled on enough already, so I'll leave it there. I'll leave it to my past self to introduce what we're talking about and then talk about my full story. And yeah, thank you guys as always for all of the support that you always show. And hopefully this is helpful in some way to even just one person. Let's get into it, because this podcast, we're going to be talking about anxiety. We're talking about depression. We're talking about stress and all those interlinked things. So trigger warning beforehand. If anybody is sensitive to anything about this, you don't need to watch. You can turn off right now. But we wanted to, just let you know that this is what we're going to be talking about. Getting real very quick indeed. Going straight into it. So I said earlier on in the stream that, you should sort of tune into the podcast, because you'll almost certainly learn something about me that you guaranteed not to have ever known. And it's that I have, for 10 years now, I think I first developed it 10 years ago, had struggles with anxiety. And it's something that I've always kind of wanted to talk about ever since I started with my YouTube channel. I've always thought, when it comes to, I remember when I did the Bruffy Explains series, I had it in my mind that maybe I'll do Bruffy Explains on anxiety, because I've largely, I would say, recovered from it, honestly. And it was I'm certainly a hell of a lot better now than what I was 10 years ago, pretty much this summer. But I've never felt comfortable, I don't think. I've never known really the right format to do it or the right forum to do it. And recently I thought the podcast is kind of the perfect place because of what I'm seeing in the chat right now with all the Bruffy love emotes. It's very, this is a very safe place, I think, to talk about it. And also, something happened recently that's given me a sort of a swift kick up the arse to talk about it, because if me talking about my story through this and what I went through will help even one person who comes across this, then it will have been a worthwhile podcast. So I've put it off too long, honestly, and I'm just gonna do it. So I'm basically, this podcast is going to be me telling my story, and I want it to be fairly relaxed and lighthearted. So if any of these guys chime in at any point or interrupt me, that's absolutely fine. Don't if I'm in the middle of something and you're like, okay, what's he about to say, but they say something, don't worry about it. I've asked them to specifically chime in at various stages.
He said we can joke too. We can make
Yeah,
jokes.
you can.
Watch the
Yeah,
pre-show if you think I'm lying.
that's true.
He
I did say.
specifically asked me to be as annoying as possible. So,
I did
so
say in the
anytime
pre-show that
I'm
they can.
annoying,
Yeah,
it's his fault.
we can have some jokes about it. We can have a bit of lightheartedness because I think that's the best way to treat it, honestly. A lot has moved forward in the last 10 years when it comes to mental health and stuff like that, and certainly it wasn't anywhere near as good back when I started going through all this as it is right now. But it's just the sort of thing, like, mental health is just like physical health, right? Like, if you break your leg and you ignore the fact that you've got a broken leg and you continue to walk on it, it's only going to get worse. And mental health is the same sort of thing. If you've got a small problem and you ignore it and let it continue and continue, it's only going to get worse and worse. And that's kind of one of the things that I want to let people know, is that there should be no stigma about this sort of thing. And just like there's no stigma to needing to go to the doctors for anything physical, there should be none of it for mental issues as well.
And I'd like to chime in there.
Yeah.
I really like that analogy because with the broken leg, is because your broken leg will get better, but it's not going to heal in the right ways.
Yeah.
And I feel like with mental health, if you ignore problems like that, you're going to heal in a way, but you're not going to heal in the right way. You're going to have kind of you're going to have maladaptive tendencies, and you're going to
still
be very
have like underlying
defensive about
things like that can crop up, sort of thing.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it's like you don't just go to fix your broken leg. You go to make sure that your broken leg heals back right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's like it's a multifaceted thing. So I like that. I like that analogy a lot.
And to add another layer to the analogy, there's a comedian that I really like. His name is Mark Norman, and he has this bit that he did because he is totally pro therapy. He goes to therapy every week. He says, like, brain's a muscle. You go to the gym to work out your muscles, go to therapy to work out your mind,
Yeah.
Oh, what are you doing today? Oh, back and buys. What are you doing today? Childhood trauma and letting people love me. It's like, that's what we're working on today.
I like that comedian a lot.
Yeah.
I like him.
I'll say that I've never gone through therapy, but everyone who I've ever known or spoken to or even heard from who have gone through any kind of therapy says it. There's no down. Sometimes you just got to do it, and it's great. And I think probably at some point in the future I will go to therapy for certain things, just to overcome other things. But yeah, it's a universally praised thing, I think.
Well, you're gonna hear from another one today, buddy. So
Okay,
after you're done.
Fair, perfect. Backing me up. Yeah, I've always been somewhat, of a worrier, even when I was younger. And I think it came from my mum a lot. She was certainly a big worrier about me, because I was the only child and she was the only mum, the only parent. And I guess that sort of rubbed off on me, that tendency to worry. I remember in 2006, when I was doing my GCSEs, which is the final test that you do, all the tests that you do for your exams at the end of the main school year at 16. I got heart palpitations just randomly out of the blue. Weird, and I went to the doctors about it, and then the doctor was like, okay, that's weird, send you to hospital. I stayed in hospital all night getting checked out to make sure everything was fine, and even then, like I got, I was released, everything was fine, and even then there was a mention of, it could just be anxiety and stress over the exams. And I was like, okay, moved on. It didn't crop up again, did my exams, everything was fine, forgot about it. But these are the things that were sort of going on that I didn't really think about, that, kind of would get me to a point where I was more susceptible to developing something later on, which I'll go to. Heart palpitations. So it kind of felt like a flutter in my heart, like it would beat and then it would like do a little half beat again. It was really weird.
And this was when you were 16?
16, yeah.
How old are you now?
Now I'm 31.
Ugh.
What do you mean? Ugh.
Jesus Christ. No, nothing. Great. That's awesome. Yeah, it's cool.
Holy shit, I'm nearly double the age of what I was when that was going on.
Yeah. You've grown a lot.
Oh
I
my
imagine.
god.
I like the I imagine.
Oh god. Okay. So yeah, I kind of forgot about all of that, and then everything was fine. Normal stuff was going on, and then it got to 2011, and that was the final year of my university degree, my first degree. That I was doing math, and honestly, I didn't have a good experience at uni. I didn't enjoy it that much. It wasn't bad, so to speak, but it wasn't fantastic. That people come out of uni saying best time of their life and all that kind of stuff, and I didn't really have that. And I also
I agree.
Oh yeah, you guys agree? Okay,
Yeah,
good. It's overrated sometimes.
No, I said I did have the best time of my life.
You did have
I,
that.
I
Oh, okay.
disagree. Yeah.
No, I agree with you, Bruffy.
Okay. I guess it's a very
I'll
personal.
scrap that to
Due to the
experience.
American educational system, I will never be able to afford to go to college.
True.
We're all in very different situations there. Then.
I mean, I'm still in tons of debt. The difference is I don't have to pay it back.
Yeah, that's true.
Hey, what?
Yeah,
in the UK,
Yeah, we've
you
talked
don't
about
earn
this
it.
before.
Yeah, if you don't earn enough, you don't have to pay it back. So
Jesus.
Um,
Oh, to be not American would be amazing.
so yeah, I kind of struggled at the end of my degree as well, and all the stress of the exams. It was a math degree, and we had like 6-hour exams at one point. It was just insane, and I didn't really enjoy the subject matter. I probably would have chosen something different if I were to do it again. But then my degree ended, and I had kind of nothing. Like I was living back at my parents because I went back to my parents in my final year of uni so that I could use my student loan to buy a car because I was able to drive there. So I got a car out of it, but I was living back at my parents in my old room, and I didn't really have any clue about what I wanted to do next. I had this math degree, great. Now what? I remember I went to an interview at Nissan. Nissan have a plant at Sunderland, and it was for a operations manager position. And it was one of those things that during the course of we did operations management type stuff during the math degree, and I thought, oh, this is quite interesting. Figuring out the best way, the most efficient way to have people managed and stuff like that. And then I went to this interview, which was kind of like a group thing, with 8 people, and we would run through tests and aptitude tests and all this kind of stuff and split into groups, and I just hated every second of it and thought, I don't want to do this. I don't even want to do this job at this point. So I was kind of, I would wake up every day, assessment center, that's the word that I was looking for. But I'd wake up every day, I'd turn on my laptop. I was playing Hat-Trick at the time. I think the football management game that I used to play. I'd load up that, but that's one of those games where you can't always have something to do because the games get played at the weekend, so there's nothing to do a lot of the time. And I was literally doing nothing during that summer. Pretty much the summer that was 10 years ago, this summer. I'd just wake up and do nothing. I'd surf the internet, and I had nothing going on. And that was kind of how things started for me when it came to anxiety. Because I can't really remember specifically a moment where I can identify, but I was increasingly thinking about stuff that I had, that I might have, in terms of medical problems. I would use, because I had nothing else to do, I would go on the internet and look up a medical issue that I thought I might have. And
kind of hypochondriac-ish.
Yeah, and I think that the heart palpitations from 2016 was an example of that at a low level, where I had these heart palpitations, and probably the thought of the going into the hospital and trying to figure out what it was. Could it have been something problem with my heart that would have played on something that was in the back of my mind that I didn't realize at the time, obviously. And then because I was
I'm
doing,
sure that experience was traumatic as well.
it wasn't nice.
You had to watch your mother worry about you, and
that as well.
you had to be in the hospital.
Yeah. but yeah, it's not necessarily a specific event, I suppose. That's true. Sometimes it is with people, sometimes it isn't. But it was just increasingly, I had more time for my mind to just play around with this stuff. And I didn't know what was going on.
Dangerous place to be.
Oh, absolutely. And, I was totally oblivious to all of this then. Obviously, I'm just thinking, I can't remember. I think I definitely had cancer at one point. I had ALS at one point.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, like that's what my mind. Yeah, that's what my mind was telling me. Like these type of things that my mind was telling me that I had, and I would look up symptoms of these things online, and I would be like, yeah, I've got that symptom. I've got that symptom. I've definitely got it. I ended up going to the doctors, and I think he suggested maybe this is anxiety, and his advice was pretty much just to do stuff. Like you need to do something and get your mind off it, which in a way is it's the right thing, but even for 10 years ago, I feel like the advice should have been a little bit better than that, because there's so much more that you need to do. You can't just stuff it away. But yeah,
I know, not to cut you off.
No, sorry.
I know what you mean when you're just trapped in your mind, because there was at least a year period before I started my job at Condé Nast, so before Spotify, that I remember a moment where I just was just thinking and just went into this existential meltdown, and for a year I was just petrified. I was like, anything I do, I'm gonna die. I'm gonna drive my car, I'm gonna pop a tire, go over here, and then I won't even know. I'm just going through all these things in my mind. And I was petrified. I was for a year, and then I eventually was just stop thinking about it. I didn't go see anybody, which is probably not good. I should probably see a therapist at some point, but yeah, you definitely want to keep busy.
Yeah, I mean, if you let these things twist around in your mind, it develops into very real symptoms, and I think that's what a lot of people kind of miss. And my problem was that I would experience a symptom that I thought was related to something that was serious, like a cancer or something like that. And the worry over that would give me another symptom. Now, all of these symptoms came from anxiety. It was anxiety giving me these physical and mental symptoms. But it was playing into itself, because I'd then worry about the new symptom, which would then give me more symptoms, and then that would make me worry again. So it was just a vicious cycle spiraling down all the time. And because I had no outlet, I had no job to go to keep my mind away from it, I had nothing going on anywhere else, it was allowed to just run rampant through my brain. And I guess something that I should do is, I brought up I just want to read some of these symptoms, right? These are all symptoms of anxiety. And these are things that if you have anxiety, or even depression and stress, they're all very interlinked with anxiety, just to point it out there. So, all of these things can relate to all of this as well. But these are some physical symptoms, very real symptoms that you feel physically in your body from anxiety. There's shortness of breath, heart palpitations, as I mentioned, difficulty swallowing, like a lump in the throat, obviously headaches, pins and needles, feeling dizzy, ringing in your ears, racing heart, tired muscles, joints, complete lack of energy, dry mouth, sweating, constantly anxious and irritable, twitching, getting weird twitches. I had that at one point, I think in my eye, a blurred vision, feeling mentally exhausted, cold and hot flushes, upset stomach, nausea, all that kind of stuff. All of those are, that's just a sum of a selection of, if there's even more that your mind can make you feel when you have anxiety and you're doing this sort of stuff. So if you recognize anything like that that's going on, just think, maybe listen more intently to what we're about to say, I suppose, because there's a chance that these things, they don't have to be anything more than anxiety, and it's possible to recover from it. Um,
Yeah, and that's not even mentioning my actual anxiety attacks as well, which are
panic attacks as well.
very
Yeah,
bad.
they're horrible.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those in the past year, and they're not great.
Yeah.
So
Does anyone not have these symptoms? Well, the difference is that these are symptoms that are there constantly. You know, you can have some of those symptoms every once in a while and just shake it off. But when you have, like, at least for me, I had all of that stuff all the time. There was no break. And like I said, thinking about it and trying to figure out what was going on made them even worse. So one of the things that I did, I remember, I painted my parents' fence after I went to the doctors, and he said, find something to do. So I was like, okay, I painted the fence. They needed a fence painted, so I painted it. It didn't help in the slightest because it was so boring and mundane that my mind was still able to just, run rampant. And the biggest problem for me was negative thoughts. The feeling of that dread that, okay, I've got something, I'm going to die from it. That was essentially that's what it turned out to be. And some of the more worrying stuff was forgetting things. Like, I think I remember being in the shop and I forgot. I think there was something that I forgot. Like, I forgot why I walked in, or I forgot where my keys were, or something, or a pin number, just something really basic. And I remember standing in a shop trying to work out the price of something, and if I had enough money to buy it, and I couldn't work it out. Like, this was all just that my mind being completely fuzzy from anxiety, just shoving everything out. And the problem is, I didn't know that at the time. So it makes me think, okay, what's wrong with me? I'm going crazy. My mind's just shutting down on me completely. I can't even work out a simple sum in a shop to buy something. Something's really wrong. That's it. I'm going to die. I'm going to lose my mind.
And you had a degree in it. You had a degree.
You're a math major.
Exactly. No, right? No. So yeah, the negative thoughts were the worst for me, because all of that I've just experienced all just played into more and more thoughts. But the worst, well, that was one of the worst things, but the absolute worst thing was something called depersonalization. And this lasted, I think, it didn't last too long, maybe 2 weeks to a month. But it was the feeling of, it's like a feeling of being outside of yourself, like you're not connected with your own body, to the point where I think I would wake up and experience like something normal. I would feel normal for the first 5 seconds of the day, and then I would remember, and everything that would just cloud over me, the whole anxiety, dark thoughts, this depersonalization where I just don't feel like I'm myself. It's just it's like I'm watching my body do things, and that was the lowest point that I got, I think, which was pretty much, again, this about 10 years ago this summer. And I was so deep into it that I really struggled. I had no emotions. All of those things that I explained, I was just like a zombie, essentially, just going through the motions. And because I wasn't doing anything, it just continued to make it worse. So I guess, I never had anything in terms of suicidal thoughts or anything like that. All of this was me worrying about things that were gonna kill me. So, if I'm not gonna want to kill myself, because that's what I'm worrying about in the first place. But I understand that is a big problem as well. And maybe
it being a big problem, I would like to interject and say that, like, just because you don't want to kill yourself doesn't mean you need help. You don't need help. So, like that does, you can be very not okay and also not be suicidal.
Oh yeah, absolutely, 100%. Yeah.
So, like, because I mean, before I started, looking into it and going to therapy and stuff like that, I almost use that as an excuse not to. It's like, well, I don't want to kill myself, so it can't be that bad.
Yeah.
So,
that's a trick. Yeah, that's a trick. Yeah.
When you're at that level, I don't want to die, so it's not that bad. Like,
yeah, like that's the thing. Like, looking from the outside in, it seems so ridiculous that you would think that that's a reasonable train of thought. But when you're in it, it's
of course.
completely reasonable because you just got used to the way that you're feeling. But yeah, absolutely, seek help before you get to a point where you might want to do that, because that is the last step. If I'd lived with the worst it was for me, like I said, I experienced it for maybe a month or something. If that had gone on for 5 years, 10 years, I might have got to the point of wanting to do something like that, because where's the escape? It wasn't a very nice life. I wasn't. It was horrible, especially for those the downhill section of that spiral. If that had gone on for a long time, maybe that would have been a thought. So get help before you get to that sort of point.
Yeah.
So
because you never know, maybe you would have just been like, well, I think it's going to happen anyway, so
yeah, exactly. Yeah, I've got something that's going to kill me, so I'll just do it, and at least I'll be free from whatever is going on in my head. It's not.
I think I think at some point we'll provide some hotlines just to put it like in the video and stuff. But
we're gonna, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll put it, because I'm gonna talk about, this is obviously the downhill, but there is an uphill as well. It's gonna get better. So
we're not at the bottom yet, boys. But we'll go back up.
I'm gonna talk about various ways that things that helped me and all that kind of stuff. So anything that we talk about, there'll be links in the description of this when it goes up on YouTube, and we'll try to mention all this kind of stuff in the chat, and just, I think the most important thing is to be mindful of this, so that you seek out some places yourself. If you're having issues, don't just leave it to fester, because that's what I did for an entire summer, and it went really bad. So
I think if I can interject a little bit. Like,
by all means,
mental health is such a weird thing, and it's so individual to absolutely everyone. I think you can have issues like you've had, Adam, where like you hyper focus on things, but my personal problem is that my mind doesn't let me focus on those things at all. So I had an issue a few years ago now, where every day after work I was feeling like I'd just been run over by a train. Like, I just felt absolutely annihilated, and like, I've got a desk job.
Like physically tired, you mean?
Like physically absolutely knackered,
right?
Pounding headache and everything. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with me? So I did eventually go to see a doctor. And luckily my doctor that I've got is very frank, and he told me I was a fucking moron and I was stressed, and I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense, because I don't feel under pressure at work. It's not like I'm not running through, like, I'm not like struggling to make deadlines and everything like this and whatnot. That doesn't make any sense to me. I don't feel what my idea of stress is. But because my mind was shielding me from it, my body was beginning to disintegrate because of it.
Yeah, that's absolutely a thing that can happen.
It's just, if you start feeling any symptoms like that, go speak to a doctor. They'll try their best to sort you out, because seriously, like, luckily mine was a quick fix of just like taking some time off work and just like thinking things through. But obviously things can get worse.
And as we've said, like, stress and depression and things can all give the same sort of symptoms, so it's all very interrelated. It might be in a different way, like it was with Hammer. Everybody's different. But the chat also said, what if you have too much anxiety about getting help? Well, I haven't actually, apart from that one doctor's visit that I went to, and he said, you might have anxiety, do some stuff. I haven't actually sought any help from professionals personally. What I did is, I'm going to talk about it, is did it myself to a certain degree. I pretty much learned as much as I could and understood, and that is the first step to getting some help yourself. And then if you feel like you need a bit more help, you'll be in a better place to make that decision for yourself. So yeah, we've gone the downhill. Let's start up with the uphill at least a little bit. Zexy does keep me in check too. That's right. But yeah, the start of my recovery essentially was that I came across a website. It was as simple as that. And it was about a guy who was promoting a book that he'd written about his journey and experience with anxiety. And this guy had sort of spent 10 years with these kind of struggles, and he finally got help that he needed. He finally figured it out. He'd gone to all sorts of, psychiatrists and taken all sorts of drugs, and nothing had helped. And then he finally did, and he wrote a book about it. And I came across this website about this book, and it listed, it was all those symptoms of anxiety that I read earlier. I just took them from that website because I saw that. I came across the website and I saw those symptoms. I read each one, and I cried. I actually cried. I think it was the first emotion that I'd shown in months because I had no emotions going on at that time. I just broke down because there was finally an explanation of everything that I was experiencing. I'd had every single one of these symptoms that he had just listed on this page on this website, and it was an answer. It was a start of, okay, that I've just learned something today, and that was kind of like the first little bit of breakthrough. Because, and then obviously I then bought the book, read the book. I did so much
What's the book?
The book is, I did write it down to mention it.
Because that's very funny, because I also have a book to mention later.
Yeah, it's called At Last a Life. The website is anxietynomore.com.
Paul David.
Yeah. And yeah, it was a breakthrough because none of it got better. I was still feeling all those symptoms of anxiety the next day, but it was a sort of a lifeline that, okay, here's an explanation. Something can be done about this. He's explaining about his recovery as well. It was a first step. And the problem with my thoughts was that I didn't know what they were. And they just, they were all medical in nature. So I couldn't shake the fact that something was wrong. And then finally seeing all of this explained away everything. So it gave me that release in my mind of, okay, there's nothing actually wrong with the things that you think are wrong, cancer and all this kind of stuff. It's something different. So I think that, about 10 years ago, maybe, I think the Mind website was a thing. And I did look at a number of websites. The good thing that the doctor did do for me when he said you might have anxiety is he gave me a name for it, anxiety. Even 10 years ago, it wasn't anywhere near as out there as it is now. So, but it was this website that I found that really helped me. But now there's certainly a lot more. And I imagine help is, you don't have to just go to this website that I used. I found it helpful, but it might not be for you. But there's a lot out there that you can research, and for me, that's what worked for me is just researching it, understanding it, doing the just immersing myself in it to be able to help myself recover from it, so that I knew what was going on. I'll link the website in the chat because obviously the book is linked on the website.
It's so crazy that you're saying like 10 years, even 10 years ago, it wasn't as prevalent, mental health, because my family was affected by it almost 20 years ago at this point. So when you're kind of in something and you're so aware of something, you don't realize how nuanced it is to the outside public, I suppose. Because for me, I'm very aware of it and I try to think about it a lot. But it's good to hear from other people that have experienced it and feel that the science and the medicine is progressing even in the last 10 years. So
yeah, absolutely. It is. It's definitely, I've noticed it's a lot more now and it's a lot more out there. I can't imagine me talking about this at length like I have done 10 years ago. Oh yeah, just to point out, I forgot to mention this at the start. These 4 guys on the podcast are the first 4 people I've ever told that I had anxiety outside of my immediate family, and you guys watching and listening, and you're the second. You know, that's it's been 10 years, and outside of my immediate family, I've never mentioned it to anyone, and I don't know why that is. Maybe that's something that I'll go through in therapy. I don't know. But
Even Tony?
even Tony doesn't know.
Wow.
I don't know why I was so. Maybe I was just guarding myself against it. I don't know. You know, I feel like I've mainly recovered from it now, so maybe I just wanted to sort of try to forget about it. But it's been such a huge part of my like who I am now and coming through this that, you know, I've always wanted to talk about it, but I've just never felt quite right. But hey, now is the time. Better late than never, I suppose.
Yeah. That's what we're talking about. Get it out there. Get the
Yeah.
message out there.
So yeah, the recovery for me came from, and this is what he talks about in this book, and it's what helped him. And I'm going to say what helped me. It's not going to be for everyone. It's not going to be that doing what I did will immediately fix it for somebody else. There's so many different ways that you can get help, and so you might need the help of a therapist to help you through these things. It might be something that you can do on your own, or you might have different ways to do it. But the most important thing is to just learn about it and understand it so that you can get that help that you know you need. So for me, it was all about understanding everything and taking the fear out of everything that I was experiencing. So it honestly, it took a good few years to go from that summer 10 years ago to feeling somewhat normal 99% of the time. Even though I'd only really been experiencing the full-on anxiety for a few months. So the longer that you've been experiencing it, the longer that it is that it's going to take you to get out of it. It's all about the bad habits that you have developed, your mind going through developing these bad habits of thought that you're trying to sort of reverse and not allow it to overtake, you know, normal thoughts. But it can be done because I've done it mostly. It just takes constant reinforcement. A lot, especially in those very early days, of constantly reminding myself that this is all just anxiety. This is just anxiety. This is just anxiety. This is just anxiety. Because your mind always wants to go back to the state that it's been used to, because that's the easiest, because that's what you've developed habit-wise. So, and it's a tricky little bastard as well, because what anxiety will do to you, what your mind will do to you is, okay, you'll get a grasp on all these symptoms that you've got, and you'll be telling yourself this is all anxiety, and you'll reach a point where you're like, okay, yeah, this is all anxiety. I've got the hang of this. I know that these symptoms are all anxiety. I'm not worrying about these symptoms anymore. And then it'll give you a new symptom that you've not experienced through the past 4 or 5 months, and it'll try to give you that to trigger yourself to start worrying about that instead. And yeah, again, it's a constant reinforcement that it's all the mind, it's all anxiety, and it gradually sort of comes off in layers. You know, the depersonalization was the last thing that I got, and that was the first thing to go. And the one thing that's lingered with me for the longest was the dark negative thoughts. But all the other symptoms, you might have like a few minutes a day, at least I did, where I don't think about it, and I have a few minutes where it's normal. And then I might have an hour the next day where it's normal, or it's a lot longer than that. Maybe it'll take another week, and then I'll have an hour where I won't be thinking about anything, and I'll be like, oh, I haven't thought about anything anxiety related for an hour. And then it'll be 2 hours, and then, you know, you might go a whole day without thinking about anything anxiety related, and you'll be coming to the end of the day and you'll think, wow, I haven't even had a symptom. You know, I didn't have a heart palpitation, I haven't thought about anything negative. And then, of course, at the end of that day, as soon as you start thinking about it, you'll get all the symptoms again. But it's about...
It's like the game.
It's
You know the
it's
game?
like the game, yeah, yeah.
And you all just lost the game, by the way. So.
Yeah. But
Gotcha.
the beauty of it is that the more time that your mind has free from thinking about all of this, the more time it has to recover and the quicker it heals. And that's what it's all about, giving your mind the time it needs to be able to heal. It just takes, it takes a long time, because you've got to undo all the habits that you've gotten into and all these thoughts that have been running through your head. You've got to basically reverse them and realize that there's nothing wrong with me. At least in my case, I would have to be able to have a symptom and be able to tell myself this is anxiety. It's not what I actually think it is. I have to trick my brain in that way. So that was kind of the process that I went through to sort of get out of it. Continuing my life, the first thing was getting a job at the kart circuit that I used to work at, that I used to race at. That was sort of the first step into doing something else. It was, it was just a job, minimum wage, but it was something. And I enjoyed it. And I used to go to the kart track, and sometimes I would have a day working where I'd forget about it all. And that's all good. I did a master's degree at uni, and my second experience of university was certainly a lot better than the first experience. That all helped. I remember I used to sit in my car before going to uni. I'd sort of driven to uni, and I was about to sort of get out my car to walk into the lecture, and I would get one of those negative thoughts in my head, dark thoughts, and I'd load up the blog from the site, the site that I mentioned earlier. He would write blogs from time to time. I'd just load up one of those, even if I'd read it before, or I'd load up the website itself before starting my day, and I'd just read it. I'd just read it through, and then I'd get on with my day, and that would be all I would need at that point to reinforce and keep me going for a little bit longer. And if there was ever a point where I would get this hit of anxiety about something, I'd just lean on the resources that I had to remind myself, yeah, it's anxiety, I remember, and okay, I can continue now. And then in the end, that happens less and less and less, and I don't need that anymore. But I don't think it's ever something that you're free of, honestly. Like even now, I will have spikes of anxiety at certain stages, but it's more in line with things that you would kind of expect to have a little bit of heightened anxiety with. It's just that my reaction to it might be a little bit higher, and I need to remind myself to bring it down a bit. Like when I got the COVID vaccine, I had a spike of anxiety then, especially in those 15 minutes when you got to wait afterwards. And I think the day after as well, I don't think I streamed or something. I wasn't feeling very well from the vaccine, but I also wasn't feeling very well mentally as well, because of it. But it was just one of those things that it just I remind myself again, go back to the same techniques that I used to. Just anxiety, you calm it down, and it's all fine. So yeah, I'm sure, as you say, Ramo, I always worry about missing a stream or something like that. That's not quite anxiety, but I'm sure my default state is always to be more worried than I should be for anything, really. So it's always, there's always those spikes from time to time, but because I know how to deal with it, I don't have the constant anxiety of what's going to happen when I feel that way. That's the most important thing, that you take the fear out of the way that you're feeling, so that if you ever feel like that, it's fine. You're not bothered. It's like if you have a panic attack, and some people start to then develop anxiety over getting another panic attack. But if you aren't afraid of getting that panic attack, you've got nothing to worry about. And that's essentially how it works, or at least that's how it fixed it for me. And like I said, a lot of this can be generalized to other forms like depression and stress. And I'm not a mental health professional. Just want to point that out there if you didn't know. And yeah, absolutely seek some professional help if it's something that you're going through. if it's something that you want to do, but maybe you want to be able to do the sort of thing that I did, and that would help you more, that you can read around the subject and read some books and learn some techniques that are going to help you on your own. And I feel a lot stronger now than what I did 10 years ago before I developed this. You know, I feel like a much stronger person for having come through anxiety and largely recovered from it to what I was before then. So, you know, there's always sort of the light at the end of the tunnel. There's always ways to deal with it, and there's so many different ways that will help with whoever, you know, however will work for you. But I would I think the most important thing is to just be mindful. You know, make a start on something. If you're feeling this way, or you're feeling anything that's resonated during this, be mindful of that. Be understanding of your own mind, and seek out some resources. Could be just an online website like I did. There's a starting point. You know, it doesn't have to be the full going to therapy if that's not something that you're comfortable with initially. Maybe you want to do that later on down the line. But mental health is a constantly fluid thing. And you can have bad days, you can have good days, just like physical health. You can have bad times and good times. Certainly during my recovery, it was all ups and downs. I'd have one good day and then it would be down for a week, and then another good day and then down for 2 weeks, you know, and that can just happen in day to day as well. But the most important thing is to just be mindful of it and be mindful of how you're feeling, honestly.
Yeah.
And
you deserve to feel good, you know.
Yeah,
I think that's one of the most important things too. Everyone deserves to feel good, and so just, you know, go feel. Yeah. Nas has been muted.
Nas is muted.
Sorry. Thank you for telling me. I hadn't talked until now, but you deserve to feel. You deserve to feel.
Yeah,
whether that's good or whether
absolutely.
that's bad, you deserve to feel.
That was one of the weirdest things for me is during when I was deep into it, I just didn't feel anything. I didn't feel anything, like sad, happy. There was no emotion whatsoever. And again, that's another thing, that everything you get from this, it's always something that you will then worry about even more. So yeah, I think.
I should be feeling. Why aren't I feeling? Why can't I just feel? Why can't I just feel like everybody else feels?
What is wrong with
terrible.
me? Yeah, what is wrong with me? That was a big factor before I understood what's going on. What is wrong? So yeah, I think that's pretty much my story. I've tried not to sort of go too deep into every single little facet, but I've wanted to cover everything from the very start to the worst point, to then the start of a recovery, all the way up to sort of now, which is, I largely feel okay. Like I said, 99.99% of the time I feel as I hesitate to use the word normal, but I feel what is normal for me. I feel what I think normal should be for me. And I have some spikes of anxiety every now and then, no problem. I just deal with it. Have some bad days of, you know, just general bad mental health days where you're just not feeling good, and that's okay. Everybody goes through that. And there's always, if anything, my story should, and Xerxes helps me a lot too. Yeah, absolutely. If anything, my story hopefully can let people know that it's, on the one hand, it's okay to feel like this, but on the other hand, you can recover from it. You can get better. You can get to a point where you can live life happily, you know, and everything that you've seen me do over the last 8 years of making YouTube videos and GTA stuff, it's always been, you know, I went through pretty deep anxiety. I was experiencing some levels of anxiety through all of it, and, you know, everything that you've seen me do, I'm still doing. So it doesn't have to be the end of the world, any of this, and just make sure that you're mindful of how you're feeling yourself. So yeah, that is pretty much my story. Like I said, I'll leave a link to the entire podcast down below in the description if you want to see the whole thing and hear what, you know, Nos has to say. Josh and Andy T, they sort of go into their own stories with it too. And also obviously plenty of resources down below in the description, as much as I can anyway. And yeah, whether you're experiencing any of this or not, hopefully hearing my story with it has helped in some way, even if it's just with a little bit of understanding. And like I said during the course of the podcast, it can be generalized to other forms of anxiety too, and stress and depression and social anxiety and things like that. And again, the things that worked for me is taking the fear out of it. Whether that will help you, the most important thing is to be mindful of how you're feeling and to do your best to find the things that are going to be helpful to you, and just try different things until you find something that's right, whether that is a therapist or it's doing it yourself, kind of like I did. So yeah, it's a little bit nerve-wracking putting it out there, but the fact that I've put it out there on the podcast already and had such a good response from it, and the fact that people have contacted me and said how it's helped them, it's made it easier for me to get to this point where I can, put it out there like this on the main channel. And it's something that I've always wanted to do. And if it helps only one person, then it will have been worth it. So thank you guys, as always, for all of the support, and I'll see you next time.